This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey folks, Mike here. In
Hey
today's
guys, sorry it
installment
took so long for...
So today we're talking about Thomas and the
Thomas
Magic Railroad
was...
and... Thomas and the Magic Railroad?
Magic Railroad it is.
Oh, this sounds interesting. Mind if I join in too, boys?
Oh, me too. I'm not about to let you guys have all the fun.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Hey Matt, why don't you join in too?
Sorry, not interested. I'm off to play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with Dave and Kelly. You guys enjoy doing the review.
4 out of 5. Close enough.
Would you rather have Matt bother you though, Zack?
You're right, Cam. You're right. Well, this review was a long time coming. If you know me, you'll know that I'm not one to bend to popular opinion, and this is indeed another of those moments. I'm going to start this review off by saying that Thomas and the Magic Railroad is the absolute bane of the franchise. Not Big World Big Adventures, not A Shed for Edward, not Misty Island Rescue, hell, not even that orange bucktooth brat. No, it's Thomas and the Magic Railroad, the point where the franchise spiraled out of control to the point that it became a walking punchline to the general public and never recovered, eventually leading us to where we are right now. And no, that wasn't even an exaggeration. I've explained this already, but Britt Allcroft caused the franchise's downfall, regardless of how many people will be insisting to me that she had good intentions. And to that I say, bullshit! Look, we respect Britt as much as the next Thomas fan, but good intentions mean nothing if the end result is atrocious.
To say that Thomas and the Magic Railroad had gained a polarizing reputation would be an understatement. As far as fandom reputation goes, there are those who love the film, those who despise the film, those who are in the middle, those who hated the film at first but learned to appreciate it over time, and those who loved the film growing up but no longer find it as good nowadays. Personally, I have a love-hate relationship with Thomas and the Magic Railroad. You know what? If I keep saying that title, it's gonna sound like a jumbled up mess before too long. So I'm just gonna use the acronym. TATMAR. TATMAR. Short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah, let's go with that. Saying the full title is pretty time-consuming.
That's kind of odd. But, as Douglas's driver once said,
But I could tell you queerer.
Yeah, me too.
as for me, I did find the pacing a bit slow, and I was more into what the engines were doing than what the humans were doing. Heck, I didn't even know who Stacy, Billy Two Feathers, or Mr. C were at the time, because Shine Time Station was so foreign to me. Maybe this third Mr. C and Junior were cousins of the first two. Who knows?
For me, I personally get how we all used to like this film as a kid, but isn't it time we look at it correctly and make a fair analysis of why we think differently about it now?
How did we get to this point? Well, strap in your DeLoreans and set the dials on your Doctor Who / Bill and Ted phone booths, because we're going all the way back to the early 1990s.
By 1994, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends had reached peak popularity thanks in part to Shining Time Station being such a success in America. Prior to the launch of the fourth series, Britt Allcroft had been making plans for a theatrical film based upon both Thomas and Shining Time Station, combining live action with model trains. In February 1996, she was approached by Paramount Pictures Vice Chairman Barry London, whose own daughter wanted to see Thomas and his friends on the big screen.
A little girl wanting to meet Thomas and his friends? How doesn't that sound familiar?
Wow, I honestly didn't think that ever actually happened.
That was me, when I was little.
So wait, you sent that letter to Thomas?
I would if I had known Settle's address.
What a twist!
Sorry, Zach.
Anyway, a theatrical movie was planned for 1997, but plans were ultimately cancelled when London left Paramount in September 1996. Come the summer of 1998, when just prior to the premiere of the fifth series, when Allcroft went to the Isle of Man upon seeing an advert for offering tax incentives to anyone interested in filming there, and the following year, Barry London joined forces with Allcroft once again, this time becoming the chairman of Destination Films. Filming took place from August 2nd to October 15th, 1999 on the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania, the Isle of Man, and Toronto, Canada, the latter of which was where the models were filmed as opposed to Shepperton Studios. The engines were originally going to be voiced by John Bellis, British narrator Michael Angelis, Patrick Breen, and Keith Scott. with the main live-action actors being New American narrator Alec Baldwin, Easy Rider actor Peter Fonda, Matilda actress Mara Wilson, Julia and Friends co-host Doug Lennox, and some guy from Scotland known as Michael Lee Rogers. Thomas and the Magic Railroad finally came out on July 14, 2000 in the United Kingdom, and then 12 days later in the United States, and was despised by critics upon release, mainly from the former country. We have a theory as to why it failed with critics, but more on that in a bit. Not to mention it bombed hard at the box office, forcing Britt Allcroft to resign from her position at Ghislaine Entertainment and sell the rights to Hit Entertainment 2 years later, before they were taken over by Mattel a decade after that, and we can clearly see how well the franchise is faring at this point. We'll talk more about the behind the scenes later on, but for now we want to focus on the film in its final released form.
Before we talk about the main film itself, we might as well acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Francine. Happy birthday.
No, not that type of elephant, Mr. Tamlet.
That being the title, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Lest we forget, Thomas is, or rather was, a British franchise, and the title alone is a sign that Britt Allcroft didn't give a shit about the franchise she inherited. Well, she'd already made it painfully obvious when she wrote Rusty to the Rescue for Series 4, and I don't care if you think the episode is great. However, this film made it more blatant. It's also very ill-fitting, and we'll come to that when we come to that. You want to know how the film starts? Well...
This is the island of Sodor, where Thomas and his friends live. It's at one end of my special universe.
What special universe? Does that mean Sodor is actually on Mars and Shine Time on Earth? Then how in the name of Henry's special cult does a magic railway connect the two? At least the Misty Island Tunnel made some degree of sense, and I'm coming to that when I get to it. Regardless if it's the Railway series, the Model series, the CGI series, or hell, even All Engines Go, Sodor has always been an island off the coast of England next to the Isle of Man. Also, where are the people of Sodor, and how do the engines actually move without crews? I shouldn't have to repeat myself, but people cannot excuse every stupid decision Britt Allcroft made when she was in charge, yet they constantly spit on Hit Entertainment and Mattel for doing the exact same thing. Sure, in those seasons, the crews were barely involved, but you kind of expected it after a while. There were crews involved in both Series 5 and 6, yet Tatmar doesn't acknowledge them. I know that doesn't affect the story at all, and I'm just picking holes, but you can't go against what's been established since Thomas and Gordon.
That's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about back when I talked about the Small Railway Engine saga. The way they gave drivers and firemen dialogue in the classic series to drive the Thomas episode plot home, and yet when the film came out, they just abandoned that kind of character design. Sure, they gave the human characters of Shining Time Station roles, but not humans of the Thomas series, and not even the Fat Controller as well? Seriously, what's up with that anyway?
The Fat Controller, I'd understand, as he was on holiday. But to further my point, besides Edward, engines and other characters from seasons 1 through 5 are missing. I mean, George was scripted in, but cut, and I think Cranky was due to appear at some point. I saw a couple of fan editions which added them back in.
Well, I have heard that they were also going to cast Edward in the film, but for some weird reason they just couldn't finish his model in time and that he was cut from the film as well. Sure, they could have added in the rest of the characters from season 1 to season 5 that have been introduced, but I guess it would take a lot more modeling and finding more people to voice them. But honestly, in my opinion, having Edward in the film would have been great had they not chosen to cut him from the film to begin with.
My theory is that Edward went with Sir Topham and Layhat on their holiday as their private engine, and from what I understand, it seems to be the more popular fan theory. As for the others, I imagine they're still working in the background, but for the most part, we never see them in the movie.
I guess that does make sense, but even if Edward was going to be in the film, who would voice act him? I thought of Ben Kingsley, who voiced Bagheera from the Jungle Book 2016, or John Cleese, who voiced King Harold from the Shrek movie series.
Frankly, it wouldn't have mattered if Edward appeared or not, because the film would still be terrible regardless. As far as I'm concerned, Edward's absence, along with everyone else outside of the Audrey 7, is the least of the film's problems. Which brings me on to Lady's backstory. I'll get to her character in a later section, but her backstory is a mess. Apparently, her being alive affects both the Sodor and Shine Time universes. If that's the case, then why are we seeing Shine Time lose its magic and yet things carry on like normal back on Sodor? If engines slowly began to lose their sentience over time, it might have been disturbing for kids, even though far darker films had come out from Disney by then, but at least it would have made some degree of sense so that both universes were connected. And that brings me on to the next problem. I said that the title was ill-fitting for the film, and guess what? That wasn't even a lie. Because there is way too much emphasis on Shine Time Station and not enough on Thomas and Friends. You know, the characters kids expect to see on the big screen. If the film had been called Shine Time Station the movie, no one outside the Americans would have gone to see it, but at least it would have made some sense. You could have cut Sodor altogether and the plot would remain exactly the same, and probably better for it.
And even then, it's not much of a Shine Time Station movie to begin with. Literally, the only 3 characters that were brought in from the TV series were Mr. Conductor, Stacey Jones, and Billy Two Feathers. And on top of that, Dee Dee Conn was the only actor to reprise her role as Stacy. As we acknowledged, George Carlin, the previous Mr. Conductor, had left to resume his comedy, leading to Alec Baldwin taking over as both the news storyteller and the Mr. Conductor in the movie, whereas Billy was portrayed by Russell Means. I'm guessing Tom Jackson wasn't available?
I bet if George Carlin still continued his role as Mr. Conductor in the film, I wonder how that would even turn out, especially considering his other claim to fame.
Yeah. I remember joking with a few friends a while back that if it weren't for the Thomas stories, Shine Time Station would have been a TV sitcom, similar to other sitcoms during the late 80s and early 90s, like Full House or Family Matters. You know, the type of 90s sitcom that Horsing Around would make fun of. Even as someone who has fond memories of Shining Time Station, this movie barely qualifies as a Shining Time Station movie, much less a Thomas movie. That said, ignoring the fact that most people outside of North America would be unfamiliar with Shining Time, couldn't a movie about Thomas the Tank Engine work on its own merits without Shining Time Station being shoehorned in?
Yeah, I mean, back in the 1990s, Thomas was a big deal in America, and merchandise sales were pretty big too, for both VHS tapes and toys. But apparently, Brett Allcroft thought Americans were stupid and didn't realize that it was the show based upon Audrey's creation that was successful with kids and their families. If Brett had a marketing team back then, I'd imagine that they either did a pretty lousy job or didn't do it at all. Thomas could easily have held up on his own without Shine Time Station. But no, Britt's over-fascination with Shine Time destroyed any chance of this film actually succeeding, and it destroyed any chance for Thomas to make it onto the big screen again. And with the cancellation of Shane Acker's World War II movie and the currently unknown status of Mark Forster's Thomas movie, it seems to have solidified that even before it got off the ground. If at all. We'll see. I would talk more about the story, but I don't think I need to, because there was barely any plot to begin with. Things just randomly jumped from point to point until the happy ending with the gold dust restored. Why couldn't Brit have bothered to make a more coherent story with the re-edits? It's not as if she was blackmailed into making a terrible film. Let's talk about the characters introduced in the film, starting with the only one to make it into CGI, Diesel 10. In this film, he was probably one of the few genuinely entertaining aspects about it, even if it sucked, thanks to Neil Krone's performance.
Yeah, say what you will about Diesel 10, but Neil Krone stole the show in pretty much every scene he was in.
Hello, Twinkle Toes. Remember me? Fat Hat won't have much use for you looking like that. Oh, I see you forgot to bring the sugar. How careless. Say hello to Pinchy.
Fun fact, Diesel 10's claw was given the nickname Pinchy when Krone was improvising with Kevin Frank.
I can do whatever I want. I'll get him, too, with Pinchy. Ow, Pinchy! I hate it when you do that.
But what happened after the movie came out? Well, he began to suck when he was reintroduced in Calling All Engines by stripping away a lot as of what made him entertaining to begin with, and when they brought him back again for Day of the Diesels, they tried to have their cake and eat it too by making him threatening, yet also deserving of our sympathy. Diesel 10 almost destroyed Lady, and by extension himself as well, but that's never really brought up, so that's neither here nor there, and threatened to kill Mr. Conductor. I'm not even kidding, that's literally what was implied here.
And when I find that engine, you and all those puffballs will be history.
Seriously, how is any of that deserving of our sympathy? And no, don't tell me it's a separate canon, because Diesel 10 was barely prominent between 2005 and 2013. Speaking of which, his last appearance was in the Missing Christmas Decorations, which just made him look like a petty Grinch. Throughout his time in the franchise, it's been hard to tell whether or not we should be afraid of Diesel 10, which made his character utterly confusing at best. Also, why do a good number of fans continue to sing his praises despite his unrealistic aspects while simultaneously giving the likes of both Nia and Rebecca the cold shoulder treatment? Oh wait, there's a pro-Allcroft anti-Mattel bias going on there. How could I forget? But still, I do believe that Diesel 10 is 10 out of 10 for overall irrelevance, as well as the most overrated character in the franchise overall. Yeah, more so than Edward. At least the Blue Engine actually has a role in this series. What would Diesel 10 add to the franchise that someone like Devious Diesel doesn't?
Well, we did make him more of a threat in that rewrite, didn't we? And it also showed Diesel having a bit of a more moral high ground than Diesel 10 ever did. That's basically his role in my series too, as well as having a long-standing disagreement with Bear. As both are Western hydraulics, I think they'd make good foils to each other.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I guess the Bear Diesel 10 disagreement would work.
If you remember, Zack, didn't you once say you preferred Diesel 10 to be chaotic evil instead of redeeming himself?
Yeah, what about it?
Because I totally agree with you there, brother. You can already see how much damage control that Diesel has done throughout the film, especially since he threatened to find Lady and kill the engines and Mr. Conductor. And yet they have him redeemed in calling all engines and have him gone back to evil in Day of the Diesels? That just makes no sense. If you think having Diesel 10 as a chaotic evil character is good enough for you, then it's good enough for me too. If anything, he would be like Lotso from Toy Story 3 or Tyrek from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. With him being chaotic evil and all, he would have had no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Next up, there's Diesel 10's cronies, Splatter and Dodge, or as they should probably be called, Airy and Burt Light. Even Mattel had more originality than creating these two idiots. Their models are basically Airy and Burt's repainted, and their models are exactly the same whenever they're on screen. Donald and Douglas and Bill and Ben may have done so, but they usually had a different expression to make it easier to tell who's who. They're just your stereotypical idiot, not-so-evil minions. They almost returned for Day of the Diesels, but Paxton and Sydney took their places at the last minute. Good thing too, because the last thing this show needed was another reminder of this god-awful film's existence.
In my series, Splatter and Dodge basically replace Ari and Bart. Yes, I call on that to not get him mixed up with the engine on the small railway at the Farquhar Quarry. Let's just say Mavis has a heck of a time keeping them in line. You can thank Galaxy Alvafro for coming up with that idea.
Finally, there's Lady. Here we go. I already know I'm gonna piss off a lot of Lady fans, although to be fair, I've already pissed off fans of this film in Brit as it is, but Lady is utterly useless. No, she's worse than useless. She's a fucking plot device. She's on the locomotive equivalent of a coma for the majority of this film, and when she regains her face, what do we get out of her as a character? Nothing. She talks about magic, and that's where her personality begins and ends. You could have gotten rid of Lady from this film and the plot would remain unchanged. Also, what is Lady supposed to be based upon? Say what you want about Nia, but at least she was actually based upon a real locomotive. So were the logging locos, and while the trio had awful personalities, it was still more than what Lady ever had. And you know what? As harsh as I've been toward Ashima in the past, at least she too was based on a real locomotive.
Aha! I knew you had a positive thing to say about Ashima.
That doesn't mean I like her, though. Now do me a favor and shut up so the rest of us can get this review done.
Yeah, you've brought that upon yourself, Zack.
Well, anyway, from what I understand, Lady was going to resemble Gazelle from the Shropshire and Montgomeryshire Railway, and before then, a Great Western 3031, which, coincidentally, was later reused for Emily's Hornby model. Either would have worked better than that fake-looking design Lady ended up with. She later appeared in a dream sequence for Colonial Engines and was never seen again afterward.
If I could just say something about Lady and Diesel 10's relationship in the film, what sort of confuses me is that Diesel 10's motive in finding Lady isn't that very well explained, but I remember hearing a quote from Henry when the engines were talking about Lady.
Toby's right. Diesel knows that the lost engine in the legend really exists.
What engine? What legend?
Of an engine whose magic makes her more powerful than Diesel will ever be. That's why he wants to find her.
Now, looking back and listening to this quote time and time again, I'm not sure if anyone here agrees with me, but I came up with a conclusion as to why Diesel 10 was hunting Lady in the first place. It is possibly my belief that Diesel 10 wants to find Lady so that he could steal or harness her magical powers and become a powerful engine himself. Kinda sounds like Jafar from Aladdin if you ask me. But what do you guys think about it?
That would have made this film even more ridiculous than it already was.
Yeah, you're right. It's a bit too cliché at this point.
This doesn't have much to do with the film, Zach, but do you think we should say something about Istore the Adjecme?
The what? Oh, I see. Right. Lady's life-size model has been in possession under restorative magic for the purposes of restoring it, but it would have been much cheaper to build a replica than to rip off a bunch of people out of their money for some pathetic fundraiser. Since they haven't updated in almost a year, it's safe to say that the lady prop's gonna be destroyed, but frankly, who cares about that pile of scrap wood? You may as well throw the remains into a steam engine's firebox like the Star Tugs Trust almost did with their priceless Zip model.
Yeah, on the subject of prop models, you know you have a problem when the Flexington Jukebox Band puppets and props are kept in such pristine quality, while certain props like the Tugs models and those at Drayton Manor are given the careless treatment they've been given. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Wild Nor'Wester has done a phenomenal job with making his own character, Lily, as a mesh of what Lady was initially in the movie and the name of the girl that was Brunette's granddaughter. While I don't use Lily myself, I do use Lily in the same sort of role, but she's more on the young and naive side as opposed to Lily being more of a proper lady perfectionist type engine.
I suppose having Lady as a former Wellsworth and Sudbury engine does sound like a good idea, and it does make a lot more sense that way. But there's still one thing that's bothering me though. Whenabouts in the Thomas timeline would Diesel 10 first chase Lady before she got herself into that horrible accident and ended up in Muffle Mountain? That's what I want to know.
As for the human characters, I'm not going to bother talking about them individually since they have little personality between them. Mr. Conductor's eccentricity just feels like a cheap attempt at comedy. Bernadette Stone is constantly depressed, even after Lady came back to life, and Lily and Patch are just there. Mutt the dog also exists to further what little plot there is to begin with. The only human character to have some degree of personality is Junior Conductor, but I can't tell if he's actually cousins of Mr. C or that they're father and son. Junior is far more laid back and carefree, but by the end, he accepted the burden of responsibility he had one day, but even his story felt wonky. I would talk about Stacey Jones and Billy Two Feathers, but I'm going off what we see in the film and not the show, so I'm skipping over them. And I'll come to P.T. Woomer for when we discuss the original work print.
My only problem that I have with the human characters is that they have taken up way too much screen time than the engines, considering it's supposed to be a Thomas film to begin with. I mean, sure, Michael Bay's Transformers had that same kind of treatment as well, with human characters taking up too much screen time, but at least give the engines a fair chance to have a lot more screen time. Heck, just give them an extended ending for the engines of Sodor where we could see them have a happy ending as well, for crying out loud. You did that for Shining Time Station, but not for Thomas? I'm pretty sure that may or may not be the most common complaint at this point, but I guess it's worth mentioning.
For the Magic Railroad exclusives, here's a couple of ideas I have for them in my universe. Brunette is an engineer who designed Lady for the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway, more or less a freelance design tank engine. Lily is a guard in training, maybe under the Conductor family themselves. Patch is a stable hand working on a farm on one of the branch lines. Tasha is probably a station mistress somewhere, I don't really know, I haven't really figured that out yet. The Shining Time Station humans would probably have roles more or less of what they would have in the show, but the conductors don't have any gold dust.
Now, let's move on to some of the technical aspects of the film. The visuals were fine, but there weren't that many moments where they could really stand out. The side faces for the engines just didn't work on the big screen, as some critics have said. It makes sense for television because they're meant to be read as stories, not to mention that they have smaller budgets than feature-length movies, but why couldn't they have attempted CGI faces? Live-action films with CGI elements were out by this point, so there's no reason Tatmar couldn't have done the same thing, and I think that any excuses at keeping the feel of the show flew out the window due to the forced inclusion of Shining Time Station. The voice cast we had was serviceable overall. Next to Neil Crone as Diesel 10, the best voice was Colm Feore's Toby. He really nailed his character and personality, and if there's another Thomas movie actually being made, I'd like to hear him reprise the role.
I'm sorry, you two. Diesel heard every word you said. I'm going after him to see what he does next. You'd better carry on and get the mail delivered.
Oh, you're very brave, Toby.
Oh, Diesel won't bother with an old engine like me. He thinks I'm really useless.
Yeah, I can totally imagine this Toby voice being used on Duke in the CGI series. In fact, I did a Magic Railroad parody a few years ago doing exactly that. In case you were curious, Sahane or Peter Sam, I gave them the roles of Thomas and Percy respectively in that little clip. And Percy's voice was absolutely adorable. I can see Ivor Hughes sounding like that. Thomas's voice in this movie was cute too, by the way, and I could see Henry's voice being used on CGI Boko. Gordon's voice was pretty decent, and Harold and Bertie's voice we didn't really get to hear much of, and same with Annie and Clarabelle, so I thought they were fine. I thought Lady's voice was pretty cute too.
As far as the number one engine himself, Eddie Glenn did a very spot-on job voicing Thomas. I'd say he was better than John Bellis.
What did you say, punk?
That said, I wouldn't say Bellis' performance was bad. I just don't think it suits Thomas all that well. If Edward was to be featured in the movie, I think Bellis would do a good job voicing him in all honesty.
If there was any voice that I think sucked, it was Susan Roman as James. No offense to Miss Roman, but she was not all that good as James.
You weren't concentrating, Thomas. Lucky for you that the buffers were there.
I feel really bad for Michael Angelis. He's always done a great job as James, beginning with Series 3 all the way up to Series 12, and to replace him with someone who did a subpar performance at best just feels like a kick in the nuts. But at least Angelis returned for 11 more seasons, while John Bellis has remained in the background ever since. Who knows what might have happened had Angelis stayed on?
I haven't got much to say about the voice cast, but I totally agree with James's voice actress, in fact. Why not let Michael Angelis continue to voice him instead, since he did a good job the past 3 seasons after Ringo Starr left? I always thought that Diesel 10 would be voiced by Idris Elba, who voiced Shere Khan from The Jungle Book 2016 too. It fits well, right?
If there is one technical aspect of the film that I would say was amazing throughout, it's the music. Human Man's themes were superb, and a lot of them captured the atmosphere beautifully, even replicating Mike and Jr.'s themes from the show, like the really useful engine intermission. This was probably the one time in the film that it actually felt like Thomas, or at least close enough.
As Zach has mentioned, some of the scenes for the movie were shot on the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania, with the Norfolk and Western 475 being used as the Rainbow Sun, as opposed to the Union Pacific 844 that was seen in both the opening and closing credits of the Shining Time Station TV series. When I was growing up, the Lancaster area was my family's go-to vacation stop, and the Strasburg Railroad was a regular stop for us. So for someone who's had his fair share of visits to this area during his youth, seeing those shots brought a sense of familiarity to me. While on the subject of the Strasburg Railroad, during the first weekend of May 1999, they held their first of many Day Out with Thomas events. Much of the event was documented on the VHS and DVD 10 Years of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, as well as on Fox Family's Storytime with Thomas, which was where several Season 5 episodes aired prior to being released on VHS. It also aired some of Seasons 1 through 4, as well as Britt's other show, The Magic Adventures of Mumphy.
That's something I wonder, Mike. Just what is it with Britt tying her own creations with Thomas?
Well, no Mister meshed Tugs and Thomas and Friends Railway series together seamlessly with 10 Cents stories.
Yeah, considering that both series had been filmed by David Mitton when he collaborated with Brett Alcroft as well. Sadly, that sister series only got just 1 season.
You know, I read somewhere that some Tugs characters were going to be included for a scene called Thomas's Seaside Run-By, but because Tugs was obscure outside of the United Kingdom, and not to mention debates between Brett Alcroft and David Mitton over how much model work could be included in the film, that never happened.
So what you're saying is, had the Tugs characters been used in that scene, Thomas would have had its own equivalent to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And with the inclusion of Big Mickey in Series 3, although he wouldn't speak or be mentioned by name until Series 21, that makes that bit of trivia pretty interesting in hindsight.
Honestly, if they did include the Tugs scenes, that would have made this film a bigger mess than it was. So, thankfully, we didn't lose much.
Still, it would be interesting to see how that would roll out. Who knows? We may even get a Thomas and Tugs crossover, since they were filmed in the same kind of style back in the 1990s before the Magic Railroad.
Alright, so now that we talked about the film as it is, let's get into what the film might have been. As I'm sure most of you might be aware, last year in May 2020, the original workprint got leaked online. Well, actually, it had been leaked in December 2019, but it was 6 months later that the leak was taken seriously, and fans went nuts over it, both positively and negatively. Positively, because they got the chance to see what P.T. Boomer was like and what the original voices might have sounded like, even though some of them were temp tracks. Negatively, because it wasn't supposed to be released, and even Britt Allcroft herself went mad over it, condemning anyone who had a copy of it. Pretty funny that the original chase scene with P.T. Boomer that was leaked in 2009 raised a lot of hype and interest, yet a workprint of the original cut that was leaked 11 years later pissed a ton of people off. But hey, that's internet types for you, am I right? Anyway, and no, the Blu-ray wasn't released because of the leak. It was because of COVID-19 that the release date was pushed back a few months. Eventually, it did come out in September that same year, and we got to see all the deleted storylines. which were literally just the work print cropped up into widescreen, chopped up into smaller pieces, and mixed with footage from the Blu-ray version of the film. And I didn't even bother to clean up the deleted footage just to make it look presentable. That's lazy editing right there, and even if you took this godforsaken pandemic out of the equation. But that is the least of my issues with the deleted scenes. Now the big question I'm sure most of you are wondering the answer to, would they have made the film any better? No, absolutely not. You know how people criticize the lack of Thomas in the theatrical cut of the film? If anything, that issue would have been taken up to 11 because there is even more involvement with Shinetime Station and a bland-as-hell bunch of human characters, and it would have pushed Thomas and Sodor even further into the background, making the title a bigger lie than it already would have been. I think Huey Man could explain it best in his interview.
Most of the diehard Thomas fans are aware that there was an original script that had another character in it. And unfortunately, at one of the screenings, they brought in an audience that was mostly 4 and 5-year-olds who loved the movie when Thomas was on camera, but as soon as the live action people were on camera alone, they got very fidgety. Basically, it was recommended that they pull out one of the characters and make it more Thomas and his friends centric. Britt did so, and I know she was not very happy about that.
And what was Britt Allcroft's response to that?
I saw no reason whatsoever why I should have to cut the film.
I'm sorry, but what was that?
I saw no reason whatsoever why I should have to cut the film. No reason whatsoever. No reason whatsoever. No reason whatsoever.
Eat my balls, you raging egomaniac!
Now, I'm going to say this as calmly and rationally as possible. Of course there was a fucking reason why the film had to be cut down! It was because Britt Allcroft was ignorant of the fact that children, the actual target audience, cared more about Thomas and his friends and not Mr. Conductor, Burnett, and Lily. And some people struggle to understand why I'm so critical towards Britt Allcroft. This is why, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binaries, that one line right there suggests that she didn't realize that children are actually far smarter than she assumed, and her failing to realize that was what led to this film bombing at the box office. This also shows that Tatmar was doomed from the get-go because she let her ego get the better of her. If this was a Shinetime Station movie, maybe this wouldn't have been so bad, but she wouldn't have flogged its whatever it has of a send-off to the world if she didn't market it as a Thomas the fucking Tank Engine film. If people thought Britt Allcroft understood the franchise, they probably don't understand her as a businesswoman. She may have been good at envisioning how the railway series could have been adapted for television, but she shouldn't have been allowed to partake in the creative process of the film to begin with.
Wow, that response was neither calm nor rational.
You okay, Zach?
Yeah, I'm fine.
If you want, I can take over for a moment while you collect yourself.
I'll go get some water for you, Zach. I'll be right back.
Thanks, guys.
So, while Zach takes a moment to pull himself together, what can we say about the deleted storylines? Well, we saw a lot more concerning Burnett and Lily's distant relationship, and Burnett has more going on than just being a miserable old grump. I mean, he actually feels like a character here. So does Lily, who actually has a reason for being here. It's because her mother's pregnant, and her father is away on a business trip. However, they come with a major caveat. What went on with Lily and Burnett could have worked as its own movie. It doesn't work too well when it clashes with the world of Sodor. And now we come to the most knowable missing organ in the film's body, P.T. Boomer.
Okay, Burnett! The clothes are off!
Whatever you say, Boomer!
Names. Okay, Zach, whenever you're ready.
Right. So P.T. Boomer is the one aspect of the original workprint that fans hyped the hell out of back when the original script was first talked about in 2007 on the original Sodor Island fan site. The idea of a human villain in Thomas and Friends seemed an exciting prospect, and probably for the first time, the Thomas fandom was introduced into a world of what might have been. I've watched the same workprint as many fans did, and for a while, in the midst of Magic Gate, I felt a bit guilty about it, but now, not anymore. And I'm gonna say it right now. P.T. Boomer is the worst villain in the Thomas franchise. He's not scary or threatening, and he sure as hell isn't funny, and that all comes down to why he wants Lady destroyed, because she was jealous of Burnett's relationship with Tasha when they were kids. That's his motivation. He couldn't get into a woman's pants. This is Wallflower Blush levels of stupid right there, and she's someone who got angry with Sunset Shimmer despite that the latter had nothing to do with the former, erasing embarrassing moments she didn't want to remember.
I don't know about you, Zack, but the way you worded Boomer's motivations do sound incredibly creepy to me.
Oh, sorry, Rachel. Bad choice of words on my part. Anyway, let's not forget that Boomer wants to destroy Lady. But didn't he already do so almost 40 years ago? Why is he coming back again just to finish the job? To spite Burnett? Hell, we already had Diesel 10 wanting to destroy Lady, even if his plans didn't make any sense, so why two villains with the same goal? This was probably the real reason that Boomer was cut. Not the fact that he was scary, which he barely was, but the fact that he, along with the rest of the human cast, took the focus away from Thomas and his friends. Diesel 10 was the far more entertaining villain in the theatrical cut, so Boomer served no purpose whatsoever. Frankly, the test audiences did the film a favor by suggesting he be removed, because if anything, Boomer was more of a nuisance than a genuine threat. Not that it made it any better, but still. Diesel had far better motivations for his actions in Season 2. Sailor John had better motivations in Sodor's Legend of a Lost Treasure. Frankie and Hurricane had stronger motivations in Journey Beyond Sodor. Hell, James had better reasons for his actions in Tale of the Brave, and he wasn't even an outright villain. Compared to V's antagonists, Boomer's the adult equivalent to a school bully and nothing more. Messed up in the head, not even the slightest bit terrifying. I get more scared by the dust in my closet.
Still, I believe this guy should have been imprisoned by the movie's end if you ask me. In my take, he bought Diesel 10 as a private engine and they work with Ari and Bart. Ari and Bart also have a clash with Diesel, so yeah, I think I'll save that for another time because that story is a bit intense if you ask me.
For how much I've ripped this miserable excuse of a film apart, there's one thing I'm still clueless about. What was Britt Allcroft trying to achieve with Thomas and the Magic Railroad, regardless if it's the original cut or the final cut? I don't think even Britt herself knew what she wanted to achieve with this stupid film, but if you got an answer, I'd love to hear it. And no, that wasn't sarcasm. After 4 seasons, the franchise should have found its identity by this point, but then Series 5 came along and pandered to older kids by taking a darker and edgier approach with tons of crashes and explosions, and that didn't make any sense because the film also tried to appeal to little kids with the explosion of gold dust, magic, and cute named scary objects. If you think that last paragraph was confusing, it's nothing compared to the film itself. Thomas and the Magic Railroad is an absolute travesty from beginning to end, and the few positives it has don't salvage it. It is the absolute antithesis to what the franchise is built upon in the first place, and should even qualify as a Thomas film despite the fact that his name is in the fucking title. Say what you want about Journey Beyond Sodor, but at least the plot is actually coherent and the villains are actually entertaining. Say what you want about Big World Big Adventures, but at least it actually remembers that it's a Thomas and Friends film. Hell, every Thomas special from 2005 to 2018 feels more like a Thomas film than Tatmar ever did.
As far as the movie itself, it would have worked fine as a Shining Time Station film. What if Burnett had caused Lady to crash years ago because of his own pride and hubris, and that haunted him for many years to come? Then come the present day, Lily comes to stay for the week and helps him overcome his guilt, while Boomer lurks in the background, maybe with Schemer as his sidekick with false promises, catching interest in rumors about a lost engine that's the guardian of Shining Time and the Conductor family. I think it would have worked in all honesty, and would have been a much better send-off to Shining Time Station than what we've got.
Growing up and looking back at the film, I now understand why Zack thinks so poorly of the film to begin with. Despite what I said at the beginning about liking this film as a kid, even me and my sister found it enjoyable when we were young, and admittedly, it did give me some fond memories of the film as well, but as an adult, you can now see the film's many flaws. You would have to be really young to get any enjoyment out of this. But if they really do want to make a film about our favorite blue tank engine, it probably would be best not to merge it with Shining Time Station that has some associations with it in their own series, but make it as a standalone Thomas film itself. Apart from Bertie wanting to race Thomas at one point, the film doesn't even make any brief mentions or references to the Railway series, or even the main TV series, which is what I think should have made that film golden. But of course, I do thank Britt Allcroft for starting out the series to begin with, but with the film being made, Britt just likes to have things her way, and that was what led to her and the franchise's downfall. But the one scene that I find the most enjoyable, and I'm sure most other fans do as well, is the final chase scene between Thomas, Lady, and Diesel 10.
For me, I don't find the film too bad in all honesty. I have fond memories of watching it as a kid, though in retrospect it was only really because of the engines and their non-real friends on Sodor. Had this film been two separate ones, one for Shining Time Station and one for Thomas and Friends, I think it would make things much better. Either that or make Lady a well-up-and-settled angel or something, and make her backstory more grounded in reality.
You know, while it's not directly related to the movie at hand, I remember a while back mentioning that Shining Time Station and Equestria Girls are basically similar to one another. What do I mean by this? Well, both are indirectly responsible for the downfalls of Thomas and My Little Pony respectively. With the success of Shining Time Station, Birdall pandered to the American audience, and it finally crashed and burned with both Series 5 and especially Tatmar. With Equestria Girls, Friendship is Magic ended up giving many undeserved villain redemptions, some of which come off as worse in a post-COVID world, and the less said about the series finale, the better. Also, both are overshadowed by their respective main shows, most likely due to the heavy emphasis on human characters. The Thomas stories could have worked fine on their own without Shining Time Station, and the quality of MLP's stories were consistently better than those of Equestria Girls, for the most part. And lastly, both have an ensemble Dark Horse character that somewhat salvages each show from total obscurity. Shining Time Station had Schemer, and Equestria Girls had an almost literal example with Sunset Shimmer. That's all the similarities I can think of off the top of my head, but my point is that both Shining Time Station and Equestria Girls completely lack what made Thomas and Friends and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic work in the first place. Who knows what might have happened to either of the show had both spin-offs never been created in the first place.
Yeah, even back in 2013 when the first Equestria Girls movie came out, in the back of my mind, I've been comparing it to Tatmar. Both movies involve humans and magic portals, and both movies fail in comparison to their respective main shows. After hearing what Zack said about the comparisons between the two, that comparison starts to make so much more sense in hindsight. While I still have a fondness for Shining Time, the show itself only aired in select countries, whereas Thomas itself was more internationally well known. Even in the new millennium, you ask some random Joe on the street about Shining Time Station, I'll guarantee you that unless they watched the show growing up, they would have no idea what you were talking about, until you bring up that little blue tank engine himself. Or even mention the fact that Ringo Starr or George Carlin played the train conductor, or that Frenchie from Greece was in it. If that isn't a sign of what little relevance the show sadly has today, then I don't know what is.
As for Magic Railroad itself, should the film exist in any capacity? I think it should, as a reminder as to what happens when one person takes too much control of a franchise started by a clergyman 76 years ago, and how said franchise ended up on a downward spiral that it never fully recovered from. And with what's coming out this year, I don't see things being any better for Thomas and his friends. And we all have Birdall to thank for that. She may no longer be involved, but as far as I can tell, nothing has changed over the past 20-odd years.
As stated before, Zack, Rachel, Cameron, and I have respect for Brett for making Thomas a worldwide success and creating our childhoods. But that doesn't mean we can't criticize the choices she's made during her time with the brand. Ignoring Tatmar, Zack has brought up several of the decisions she's made, good and bad, in Sodorama Series 1 through 5. Please go and check them out. Also, if you disagree with us about the movie or any of the decisions Bert has made, then that's fine. Just please don't harass any of us about our views on them. That's all we ask. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to prepare for a new series on this channel. Catch y'all on the flip side, and until then, take care of yourselves.
Yeah, I'm heading out too. I need to finish making my newest Sodrian Stories saga and playing Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury for Switch. I might just catch up with Matt, Kelly, and Dave with Super Smash Bros. And make it a 4-player match. See you guys!
This has been fun, boys. Now I better go and finish up a few more standalones, then we can leap back into the collab, Zack. Bye!
Thanks, Mike and Cam, and see you in the mashup, Rachel. If you made it this far into the review, I congratulate you and apologize for how long this review was. I'll admit it did go on a bit longer than I thought it would, but between myself, Mike, Rachel, and Cameron, there was a lot that we needed to cover, and I'm glad we finally got to cover the first Thomas movie. And there's only 13 more to go, so hopefully I'll have an easier time talking about them. I mean, none of them can surely be that awful, right?
You're psychotic! You're the heartless rolling troll, an annoying one-trick monster in a movie that never sold Diesel 10. I really thought it was funny when you fell off that bridge.